Hello, world. Good afternoon. Namaste and Nisam Bulavinaka from Sydney, Australia. I am Sashi Singh, the host of Sashi Singh's Talking Point. I guess it's a record-breaking day. We had a broadcast this morning when I said good morning, world. And this is a special broadcast. Welcome to this afternoon's episode 50 of SSTP. Well, as I said this morning, that once the results are in, we will be back, and we are back as promised. The results are now in for the 2022 general elections. I will shortly have Professor Wadan Narsey join me to discuss the results and the seat allocations that he has worked out in accordance with the DONT system of voting, However, before I continue, I have two important announcements to make. First, being an unusual broadcast on a Sunday afternoon for Sashi Singh's Talking Point, may I please request you, if you could share this page with your family and friends so that when Professor Wadan Narsey speaks and breaks down with his analysis of these elections, that we can share that information with as many people as possible. And let me also tell you, I will be sharing a few juicy bits and pieces as well. So let's share it with as many people. Please share this broadcast with as many family and friends that you can. The second part of the announcement is that emotions run high when we talk about politics, when people talk about race and religion and things like that. Today, we don't want to talk about race or religion. We are talking politics, particularly Fiji politics. So control your emotions. And my announcement is that Sashi Singh's Talking Point, SSTP, recognizes that questioning, constructive arguments, and opinions are part of conversation. But posts with aggressive personal attacks, profanity, name-calling, swearing, defamatory in nature and/or threatening will be removed immediately, and offenders will be blocked from being a part of the SSTP program. Don't want to do that, but we will do that if you do not follow the rules. So let's all observe the rules of the program and enjoy the program. Now, if you did not tune in to listen to the live broadcast by the Fiji Elections Office, well, that broadcast went on for 40-something minutes as the supervisor of elections read a number of names with the votes cast, etc., as he was supposed to do. We've just got a little excerpt of the key part of the announcement. So we'll play you that excerpt of what the supervisor of elections said.
The following are the turnout statistics for the election. Total valid votes, 470,584. Total invalid votes, 3,326. Total voter turnout is 473,910, being 68.3% of the total voters. Ladies and gentlemen, I will now read out the totals received by each party and independent candidate in order of highest to lowest. Fiji First, 200,246. The People's Alliance, 168,581. National Federation Party, 41,830. Social Democratic Liberal Party, 24,172. Unity Fiji, 13,100. Fiji Labour Party, 12,704. We Unite Fiji Party, 6,070. All People's Party 2,638, New Generation Party 464, Rajendra Sharma 198, Ravinesh Reddy 81.
Well, that was the announcement in a very summarized version. We didn't want to play the whole 48, 49, 50 minutes of the supervisor of elections reading names and announcing the votes that each candidate got. And now we have those figures as to what the total voter turnout, etc., was. Just before I introduce our chief guest, just want to acknowledge some of the comments coming through on our Facebook broadcast this afternoon. Um, we have Chandrasekharan saying thank you for the special broadcast this afternoon. And Brad Allen has written, I would like to know why Sodelpa are even entertaining the idea of siding with the Fiji First Party. The only logical reason would be that they are bluffing to get more senior posts within the PAP NFP coalition. I hope this is the case. Binesh Sumer says, you're doing a great job, Sashi. Thank you. Vaka Vaka Masavesi Chiochi writes, Bulavinaka Turanga Sashi sings Talking Point. Glad to join again in this episode. Nim Bulavinaka Kemini, thank you very much. And now it is my pleasure to introduce former academic at the University of the South Pacific, Professor of Economics, and former Member of Parliament in Fiji, Professor Wadan Narsey, to join me. Please welcome Professor Wadan Narsey. Wadan, good afternoon. Welcome to SSTP, and thank you very much for sacrificing your time and coming in on this Sunday afternoon.
Bula Sashi, thank you very much for the invitation. And it is a great historic day for Fiji, and I hope it all turns out well for Fiji.
All right, well, then you have done some analysis, but let me just state once again the supervisor of elections announced that the valid votes cast was 470,584. Invalid votes were 3,326. And the voter turnout was 473,910, which, according to the supervisor of elections, equated to 68.3%. Now, he said towards the end of his live media conference or live announcement that sometimes you have to wake the people of Fiji. And what he announced the other day about the low voter turnout was to get people to act. What do you make of the voter turnout?
Well, look, I tell you what. I mean, it is a relatively low turnout, given what it has been in previous elections. But let's not go into those details, because I think the important thing always has been whether the elections have been conducted according to the rules set down by the elections office. And as long as people are happy that the protocols at each venue, which they have all taken photos of and all that, are exactly the same as the results which are on the Fiji Elections Office app. There's one point there where you actually get the detailed venue results. Then whatever has been added up, they do seem to match, the results that I have. And I think you can take for granted at the moment, unless somebody points out the discrepancy between the venue result and what's on the app, that this is actually has been fairly conducted.
All right.
But I think the problem really is, Sashi, and I think everybody in Fiji who, older than 35, will probably be thinking, and they must have been thinking all this time, we've never in the history of Fiji had such a supervisor of elections who has been in your face, basically, for goodness knows how many years. I mean, there are all these other supervisors of elections. I mean, I know some going back to, the 90s, like John Apted, lawyer John Apted, and people like Graham Leong, and they never exercised the kind of influence. They didn't refer any potential candidate to FICAC or anything. Anyway, let's not talk about that.
I will come back to that, and I will discuss that with you separately. Now that the election results have been announced formally, there seems to be no real winners in this election, Wadan.
No, they aren't. You've got 55 seats. Hey, but before I go on that,
Yes,
Sashi, I must say something very, very happy for me. Which is that there've been calls from all sides of the political divide for the commander of the RFMF to interfere with the election processes, and I'm so happy that he has rebuffed all those calls from all sides, not just from the government side, but also from opposition sides, and citizens sitting in New Zealand and other places have been writing letters to him and to the president and all that. He has stayed true and he hasn't interfered. And this is very good for the future of Fiji, that the military do not interfere with civil processes. So the results, Sashi, 55 seats altogether. If any party had got 58, which is more than 50%, they would have been entitled to form government.
absolutely right.
What happened?
Absolutely right.
What happened was that Fiji First Party got to 26 by the D'Hondt method. And the people can read an article I've just put on my website, which tries to explain the D'Hondt method. It's pretty complicated, but essentially it is almost proportional, because if you applied strict proportionality the way New Zealand system works, FFP would have got about 25 seats. But anyway, 26 is not too far. They could not make 28. People's Alliance and NFP together got 26. So between them, and they had declared their coalition before, they could not get 28. So SODELPA came back with 3. And as I had predicted in one of the models, not predicted, I had said, okay, well, look, what if SODELPA makes 5%? What will be the scenario like? And it's turned out to be exactly that. SODELPA is now the kingmaker. And I think
Yes.
they're going to have some very, very fun-filled days, in the next few days, trying to squeeze things out of the two opposing sides. So SODELPA, if it joins Fiji First, they make the majority. If SODELPA joins the People's Alliance and NFP, then they make the majority. And just for interest's sake, one thing, voters might want to think about, if FFP joins, SODELPA joins FFP, they will represent 48% of all the votes cast in Fiji. If SODELPA joins People's Alliance and NFP, they will represent a higher, just slightly higher, 50% of all the votes cast. So in terms of democratic legitimacy, I think already by the numbers, SODELPA ought to look at at PEP, at the People's Alliance and NFP, because if they do join, they represent half the people of Fiji.
All right. I'm going to take a step back because I think you brought a very important point. We'll break down the results, but
Yes.
this is on the Army Commander Ro Kaluniwai. You commended him for the stance he's taken.
Yes.
Let me tell you, when he made that first announcement at the last passing out parade for the year, that took everybody by surprise, and that was a pleasant surprise indeed.
Yes.
And then when there was a call after polling started during the last few days by some segments of the community, a call to the military commander, again, he stood very, very tall, and he made that announcement that it was not within the constitutional powers of the military forces to intervene. And I take off my hat to Commander Ro Kaluniwai, because
Yes.
that itself spells that Fiji, in terms of the military, seems to be in safe hands where common sense is prevalent.
Yes.
Agree?
Yes. Yeah.
All right.
Sure.
Well, you were talking about SODELPA being the kingmaker. Mr. William Ngavoka Bill had a press conference this afternoon, and I watched bits and pieces of that. He made a couple of very, very interesting points when questioned. He said that regardless of the commitments he had given prior to the election, the
Yes.
game is now quite different. And he said paramount is the ethos affairs and the interest of the nation. What do you make out of that?
Well, I think one of the things that we need to think about is that when you look at the opposition parties, Sashi, so don't go by the calculation in the D'Hondt, which are just a theoretical calculation of quotients, right? Go by actual votes received by each MP who's got into parliament. One of the interesting things to me is that the opposition parties, that's People's Alliance, NFP, and the Sodelpa people, each one of them has got a very large number of votes behind them, very
Mhm.
large. So if I give you an example, right, the People's Alliance last MP has got 1,649 votes. When you rank them in number of votes received, 1,649. That's a decent number. The last NFP MP has got 2,024 votes.
Wow.
And the last Sodelpa MP has got 1,239 votes. So each member of these opposition parties, they have got a substantial community support behind them. And in contrast, when I look at the Fiji First Party, a list of MPs who are making it to parliament, well, it's happened before in the previous election as well, right? Large numbers of people with very few votes behind them. And so, if you like, less than 1,000 votes in the FFP, there are 11 MPs who have got less than that.
Yes.
In other words, they've got so few votes that within their own caucus meetings, within their own cabinet meetings, if any MP sort of puts his hand up, and says, sir, I disagree with that, I can imagine the two supermen sort of saying, hey, shut up, how many votes did you get in the election? And of course, they don't even say it, and we even know that there are people who have got 3,000, 4,000 votes in the Fiji First Party, who basically, don't have the presence that they ought to have. And all the decision making is made by the others. So I'm quite optimistic, about the fact that the opposition MPs, all of them, including Sodelpa, right? They've got a decent number of votes behind them, and they have a standing in the community. Which is not the same, in Fiji First. Of course, in the Fiji First, there's two guys there who got enormous numbers of votes, so they do have standing. There are about 3-4 others who got about 2,000-4,000 votes, but they have been ministers in the Fiji First Party government for how long now? And you would have expected them to have a bigger following, but they don't. And it's all indicative of the fact that in some parties there's a tall poppy syndrome at work. Anybody who sticks their head up above the fence gets it chopped off. So I think it is very interesting. One thing that dismayed me about this election, honestly, Sashi, is
Yes.
that there are some popular leaders who got a really reasonable number of votes for themselves personally and for their parties, and they're not in parliament. I look at Narube, he got 6,845 votes. That's more than 15 Fiji First Party MPs put together. Then you've
Mr.
got
Chaudhry, Mr. Chaudhry.
yeah, he got 5,760 votes. And I've worked out in my tables there that together, if all the small parties had put their votes together and joined up amongst themselves, forget about joining the large parties, right? If they joined up amongst themselves, they would have been entitled to 4 seats in parliament. Wow. And
Well,
parliament
then,
has been denied their services. How do you explain that?
well, under the Don system or the Dihon system, this is the irony of it all, that somebody with 400-500 votes sits in parliament, whereas somebody belonging to a party with 6,000, 5,000 votes has no place in parliament. We will come back to that.
Yeah. But
We will come
that's not because of the Dihon system, Sashi. That's because of the 5% threshold.
threshold. Yes,
Yeah, 5% threshold. Yeah.
I was just going to say we'll come back and
Yep.
discuss the threshold in a moment.
Yep.
But just before we move on, I want to share with our viewers. I received something on Messenger, and I've spoken to a parliament. Well, one of the candidates from the People's Alliance this afternoon. His name will be at this stage confidential, and he also alluded me to this. And this is regarding the Ngarise family. The son of former Prime Minister Laisani Ngarise apparently has released a statement about the outcome of the 2022 general elections, and the family has made it clear that it is unthinkable for Sodelpa to hold talks with the Fiji First Party to form a coalition government. And Mr. Ngarese's son has allegedly said that if his father was alive today, he would have made sure SODELPA would have shunned the Fiji First Party and helped the People's Alliance Party and the National Federation Party form the government.
Yeah.
SODELPA must not ignore the 58% of the voters went against FFP. That is the clear message for change, and SODELPA must immediately cease talking with the FFP. And that was the message from the Ngarese family. I must tell you, Wadan, I tried. I was told to contact so and so to get Mr. Ngarese's son live on this program. And due to time constraints and due to telephone issues with Fiji, each time I call this number, you know that famous message, the number you have called is diverted. So I got
Yeah.
that message. But look, one or two of the, I guess I'll wait until I discuss demands later.
Yeah.
All right. You started off today. Immediately you mentioned the supervisor of elections. Let us try to analyze this. The supervisor of elections, how different has he been from all previous supervisor of elections? You said he's in your face. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, the thing is that, all the older people, if you ask them, for example, hey, who was the supervisor of elections, 20 years ago? Most of them couldn't even remember their names. Because what they did was they did their jobs quietly. The elections were held, ballot boxes were distributed, ballot papers were distributed, they were brought to the center, they were efficiently counted, right? Added up, and you didn't have fancy apps either, right? They were all done manually. So, I
Yeah.
mean, just when the election results were coming out, I actually suggested to, some of my friends in Fiji, I said, look, if you don't trust the FEO app, right, all you have to do is, as the venue results come out, right, for each venue, and you can list all the venues down the left-hand side of a spreadsheet, right? People know spreadsheets these days, you can have 1 million rows. This is you only need 2,701 row for the 2,701 venues. And along the top, you have each candidate, 55 for Fiji First, 55 for People's Alliance, 55 for NFP and all that. Put in the scores for each candidate at each venue, and at the end of the counting, you can do exactly what the Fiji First Party app is doing. I don't know how much money they've spent on it, but a secondary school student doing what I'm suggesting could have done it for about $200.
Not the Fiji First app, sorry, it's the Fiji Elections Office app.
Fiji Elections Office, sorry.
Yeah,
Yeah,
not the
yes.
Fiji First.
Not the Fiji First app.
That's a correction.
Yes,
The
but
Fiji
the
Elections.
thing is, you got to remember that the Fiji Elections Office answers completely to the Minister for the economy, right? And he's been a very active bloke, and
Minister for
the
Elections.
supervisor of elections. Yeah,
Yeah.
he's actually, you can see none of the opposition parties have faith in him, and all of them have publicly complained about him, right? So everybody can't be wrong, right? But the person has been in your face, as I say, and then you look at the number of candidates who have been taken to the police station, interrogated, charged. Some have been convicted and disqualified and all that. One prominent lawyer, well, I mean, I joked with him, hey, you become a martyr now. You can go into any international job in the world that you want. I hope he's watching this program, right? And get 10 times what you're earning in Fiji, right?
He does watch.
And for no reason at all. He was charged and found guilty by the judiciary in Fiji. It has made a mockery of Fiji. So the supervisor of elections, well, let's not spend time talking about him.
Now we're going to spend one more moment on that.
Oh, okay.
I mean, look, I won't have another opportunity until perhaps the new year when I can twist your arm to come back on the program for some other topic. Again, on the supervisor of elections, would I be correct in saying that this is the first time in Fiji's history that the supervisor of elections has actually made complaints to FICAC to get people charged, to get people investigated, to get people disfranchised from the electoral process? What's your comments?
Well, what you're saying is absolutely correct, Sashi. And it is to the credit of all the opposition parties that despite this fear of prosecution, of being disqualified, of being criminalized, and I mean, that lawyer we're talking about, I mean, he could possibly, have lost his income for life because of what has happened, and his reputation tarnished as well, right? And all because somebody played a political game. Now, look, to be honest, I sincerely hope that one of the institutions that can be reformed, when the next government comes in, is the entire Fiji Elections Office and all the processes, including the Electoral Commission, which needs to be appointed, in some kind of a consensus way between governing parties and opposition parties, so the whole public can have faith, in that office. At the moment, people do not have faith, in that office, and it is a tragedy for Fiji. And it's a miracle that it hasn't been worse. And let me tell you, I think everybody in Fiji knows that when the elections counting was going on, all of a sudden there was a huge glitch. How can you have a $100,000 software and suddenly one candidate gets 15,000 votes, and you don't know how he's got 15,000 votes? And then you go off the air for 2-3 hours, and you come back with a result, and then you go off the air again, and then you have a completely opposite result. And then you look at the final count now, right? It is so difficult from that count that was there, at the beginning of the counting. So, to be honest, even like this morning, they're supposed to release the last 24 polling station results at 6. They said, no, it will be at 9 or something. And then they
At
said,
2 o'clock.
11, and
At
then
2 o'clock.
2, and then 4. I mean, what for? Why were they doing that?
Yes. Okay. Let me also say, I mean, I love what you say. And look, you've been around the block. You've been a former parliamentarian, an academic extraordinaire in your academic field, Professor Narsey. Let me say to you, one important point that you made is transparency. Now, for God's sake, we must have an appointment of a supervisor of elections who is allegedly not related to the Minister for Elections. I mean, there's a lot of criticism that's been flowing that the two gentlemen are related. As I said, that's allegedly they are related. Now, the other thing is, of course, the conflict of interest one has when a ruling party general secretary wears the hat of a minister for elections, and then, what can you say about that? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Well, he's the one who made a complaint about that lawyer, and then when the court case was on, he refused to come and be questioned by the defense lawyers. I mean, how utterly obnoxious that you can make a complaint about somebody, say that person is charged, and in the court, of law, you refuse to appear. So that's the kind of thing that's been happening. But anyway, Sashi, I think let's not cry over spilt milk. Let's move on. Something more constructive.
Well, my friend, the milk may not be spilt yet. They just might be a little glimmer of hope. All right, take a little sip of water, juice, whatever you have with you. I'll come back to you in a moment. A special edition of Sashi Singh's Talking Point coming to you this afternoon, live from Sydney, Australia. And wherever you are, I hope you're having a wonderful Sunday evening. If you're on this side of the world, on the other side of the world, hope you're having a wonderful Saturday night. Now, please share this page if you can. People are not normally tuned in on Sunday evening to watch SSTP. Well then, let's move on. Let's look at the parties that have made the 5% threshold. The Fiji First Party, the People's Alliance Party, the National Federation, and the SODELPA. What would you like to say about those parties making that threshold?
Well, in a way, I mean, it's like, as you just said about the message from the late Mr. Garase's son, right?
Yes.
The choices are kind of, it's any, Asman or Jamin, no? The differences are so great. And I must accept, of course, that Fiji first, when they first came in, the military government, and they began to talk about, oh, we want a Fiji where everybody is equal and all that. I was thinking, oh, well, that's a bloody good idea. It's sick of being called a Wulangi and all that kind of thing, right? And then a lot of my friends, of course, joined his efforts as well in the charter exercise, the Yashkai review, and all that. But then they gradually all got disillusioned as they realized that equality was only kind of a skin deep kind of an objective. The real stuff that was going on was really destroying the heart of the Fiji economy and society, from inside. So to me, when I look at SODELPA and its choice between the two partnerships it can go into, to me, there is really no. On the one hand, you've got a two-man show, basically, who decide on everything. They don't give their individual ministers any leeway and all that. And of course, they might promise SODELPA all kinds of things now, just to get them on board and just to form the government, right? But when I look at all the major problems that you have to tackle, right? And I can list them, and I should list them, Sashi, because we are people who have been watching the Fiji economy and politics and society for the last 16 years. We know how so many things have been changed by the Bainimarama Qayyum government. The constitution, the rule of law, electoral system, the upper house, which was so valuable as a checks and balance. I mean, in Australia, you have a House of Reps and there's a Senate. And if the House of Reps can't get their motions and things past Senate, well, it can't go anywhere, right? In Fiji, these two guys, they removed that upper house check, which also had a lot of, GCC representatives on it, plus other people as well. And then, they have interfered with all the state institutions, the judiciary, the military, the police, the prisons, the PSC, the Human Rights and Anti-Discrimination Commission, FICAC and all that. They've interfered with all the state enterprises, including the one, FNPF, which, is at the center of my heart because it's the future of Fiji people. And, they have lost so much money, in the last, 2-3 years because of these people's policies. And then you look at the media, and then you look at the massive public debt. 10 times, 10, well, it's basically 100% of GDP, when previously it used to be about 40% of GDP. This is what our children and our grandchildren, people in Fiji, their children and grandchildren are going to be paying for, right? And
Yes.
and then you look at the damage to institutions, like one which is very dear to my heart, which is the Fiji Bureau of Statistics, right?
Yes.
They have been prevented from bringing out the data which shows how badly Fiji has done, how poverty has hit us. And when one government statistician, Kamweli Ningama, he was brave enough to put the data out, he got sacked. And if you look at the data that's coming out of the Bureau of Stats, they are not able to produce the data which can help parliamentarians and opposition parties and government do the job they're supposed to do. And even an organization like FNPF, I don't know whether you noticed, FNPF's annual report, has not been published because Parliament hasn't approved it. But the FNPF board has been putting out 2-page ads in the paper, glossing over the performance of FNPF and hiding all the negative things. Well, people in Fiji will see what the negative things are when the report comes out, right? So to me, that's on one side. On the other side, they've got Rambuka. Sure, he was a coup leader, right? But anybody who knows Rambuka knows that he works in consensus with all his colleagues around him. He's not a one-man show. He doesn't micromanage. He had all these ministers when he was running, his government, 20 years ago or wherever. Biman is a cooperative player, right? And SODELPA members of parliament, they've all got votes behind them, solid votes. And, for them, if they were with People's Alliance, Rambuka, and with Biman Prasad, the SODELPA MPs will have space in which to work. They will have some freedom. Of course, there'll be bargaining, horse trading going on and all that, right? And, somebody just said to me, I saw on the FBC News that SODELPA is asking for all these demands and everything else. Well, if I was in their position, I might say the same thing as well. If I was Bill Gavok, I'd say, hey, I'd like to be Deputy Prime Minister, if you want
We'll come to that. We'll come to that. We'll look at the horse trading. We'll come to the horse trading.
Yeah.
Quite a valid point you've made, but just before I move on,
Yeah.
Shabran Hussain, in Fiji, they have this famous soap. They call it sand soap. Go and wash
yes.
your mouth. Go and wash your mouth with sand soap, Shabran Hussein, because you are no longer part of this platform. Um, your parents have not brought you up in the right way because you lack manners and you lack common sense. So, Shabran Hussein, goodbye. See you later. All right, Wadan.
Oh, is there somebody
Let's.
commenting on your show? Is he?
Well, yeah, there are
Oh,
some
okay.
people
Yeah.
who don't follow the rules.
Yeah.
Now, let's look at the possible scenario of coalition partnership,
Yes.
particularly with the votes people have. I mean, the parties have.
Yes.
First of all, the Fiji First Party and Sodelpa. How much total votes would they have attracted together once they form a coalition? I don't think it reaches 50%, does it?
No, 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 they don't. In fact, what I just said at the beginning, maybe it went over you, is that together, so Delpa and FFP, they will have 48% of all the votes cast. Whereas with
Right.
the with People's Alliance and NFP, they will have 50% of all the votes cast. But to me, it's like, even that is not a very good indication actually of what kind of cooperation they can expect in the partnership. To me, all the members of Sadelpa are strong candidates. All the people who are in the NFP are strong candidates. Five very strong candidates, and the people in Rambuka's People's Alliance, right? You go down, you can go right down to 21, and they still have large numbers of votes. There's no stooge amongst them. There's no stooge amongst them. I mean, they've all brought their votes with them. So in that partnership, there can be quite a bit of horse trading going on. But I mean, like Gavoka, as I think he's asked for board memberships and all that kind of thing. Well, that's natural. That's natural
Mm.
because in his party there are people who've got ability. Just like in Ramuka's party, there are people who've got ability and who haven't got into parliament. Just like in NFP, there are people with ability who haven't got into parliament. And when parties do make it into parliament, it's natural for them to look around to see, well, who can we get to come and help in the running of the country. And believe me, I'm looking at all the challenges that are in front of the government now, the new government that comes in all the different areas. Well, is there any area in the Fiji economy and society which does not need attention from good people?
Mm.
And the previous government, well, they had two people addressing everything.
Well, hang on. Let's just take a back step.
Yep.
If the Fiji first government comes in, it's
Yes.
more or less a continuation of the same.
Oh, yes, it will be the
Okay.
same. Yeah.
Yes.
Sure. Sure.
The only difference is if there's a brand new government that comes in,
Yes. Yeah.
only then will matters of national interest, matters of national concern will be
Yes.
addressed.
Yes. Well. Let's look at the reality. Let's look at the history. Right. From 2006, two people basically, they've run the entire show. They've got their networks, their friends, and etc., who they've appointed to boards and all that. They have basically controlled everything that goes on in Fiji, right? And these are entrenched networks. Even in good democracies the world over, good social scientists know that if a government stays in place for too long, it becomes complacent, and you need to have new brooms to come in and sweep all the dust out, and so you need to have a change of government. And for 16 years the same government has been there. For 8 years they had no elections. Let's remember that. We've forgotten that, haven't we? For
Yeah,
two
well,
terms they have had no
yeah.
elections, no auditor general report, and then one day all the auditor general reports were dumped, in the Fiji parliament, in 1 month, right? Covering 8 years. By which time all the damage was done. Who could change that? So to me, I mean, it is very important that you have a fresh breath of air, and clearly, the People's Alliance, NFP, and Sodelpa together, they can bring about this fresh breath of air. And sure, they're not all thinking alike. They've got maybe some different ideologies in some respects, but that's to be expected in a complicated society like Fiji, which is multiracial and all that, where people have got different cultural attitudes, and there has to be horse trading and give and take, so that the greater good can be served, the greater good. And for 16 years, the greater good has not been served. We've had historical levels of underemployment and unemployment. We've had historical levels of poverty. We've got historical high levels of public debt because certain two people, they refuse to live within their means. And I'm so glad to see that, the opposition parties are saying when they come in, they're going to take pay cuts. They're going to cut all
One
their
third,
perks and everything. Yeah,
one third pay cut
yeah.
from the prime minister to the minister to everybody. One
Everybody.
third pay cut. I mean,
Yes,
uh, look, let me now address this next issue. You've
yes,
touched on this, but I'd like you to spend a couple of minutes, I guess, to really break this down so people have an understanding.
yep,
Now, you mentioned a few minutes ago that all the opposition MPs have solid votes behind them.
yes,
Now, I believe you have a table or a graph.
yes,
Unfortunately, we can't share that. But
yes.
can you please just break it down step by step? At least first five or six, or in
Okay.
the FFP's case, you
Yep.
have mentioned. The last
Yes,
few
yes.
only have votes in the hundreds. Please go ahead.
Okay. Okay. So if I go down the list, right, for Fiji First Party, Beni Marama has 136,829 because that was the electioneering strategy. Vote for 234, and so
Mhm.
people did. And then the next person is 22,524 because all the campaigns for Fiji First Party had only two numbers on the advertisements, Beni Marama's
Yes,
and Kayum's. And then
yes,
the third person you come down to is has got 3,600 votes,
yes,
half that of Narube's, half that of Chaudhry's. And
yes,
if you keep
absolutely.
coming down, by the time you come to the 15th candidate, or let's say the 11th candidate, you've got somebody, as senior as Ioane Nevalarua, a very well
Mhm.
respected military officer, I mean, and he's a very, very efficient person. And he only had 1,221 votes. And Inia Seruratu had the same number, 1,221 votes, which is less than the
Mm.
last MP for People's Alliance. It's less than the last MP for NFP. And then you keep going down, and you got people with 900, 900, 800, 800, 700, 600. I mean, there are three people within the 600 votes. So
So the
basically,
pardon me, the
yeah,
last MP, if the Fiji First gets 26 seats, what are the 26th candidate?
yeah, he's
What?
got 600. He or she has got 617 seats,
Right.
votes, 617. Whereas
And
the last person in the People's Alliance has got 1,649 votes, and the last person in NFP has got 2,024 votes, and the last person in Sodelpa has got 1,239. So
what does
all the
that tell us?
opposition MPs, solid MPs, solid numbers of votes behind them. And I think they can do some very good, solid bargaining in the partnership for whatever goodies they want towards themselves. Of course, they've got to be fair, right? I mean, if Gavoka wants to say, I'd like to have the deputy prime ministership, well, I'm sure the Alliance and NFP will oblige him with that, and the certain number of ministers, right? Why not make everybody a minister? No big deal because they're people of ability as well.
We'll talk about the sweetness right at the end
Okay.
because I'm going to discuss a hypothetical with you. I
Yep.
mean, it's coming to Christmas time,
Yeah.
and Santa comes in a lot of different disguises, Wadan. So, in essence, when you look at the opposition party's votes,
Yes.
and when you compare that to the Fiji First Party,
Yeah.
there are some 11 MPs with less than 1,000 votes. And
Yep.
as you said, the last one that may qualify for the Fiji First Party is sitting on 617 votes.
Yes. Yes.
So, in summary, what does that tell you?
Well, what it basically means is that if they form government again, right, it will be basically be more of the same, where the two people at the top who've got all these high votes, right, and one person, of course, is basically the master, engineer in the whole process, Fiji First Party, right, whatever his leader may say or do, right, is that the bulk of Fiji First people, don't have a standing of their own. And so it'll be more of the same that has occurred since 2014. On the other
Mm,
hand, if it's a partnership between People Alliance with NFP and with Sodelpa, I can imagine that individual members of parliament, who are in Sodelpa, they will be able to stand and say, look, I would like this, I would like that, and provided, of course, their demands are reasonable, I'm sure the other two parties will consider them. They can't, of course, make unreasonable demands, like I want a trip around the world, every month, or something stupid like that, right? But, I'm expecting that they will be very reasonable compared to what has been happening for the last, 8 years.
All right. Let's look at the popular leaders who chose not to join the larger parties. I mean, let's look at Mr. Chaudhry for a start. The Fiji Labour Party, they chose not to go into a coalition. Right in the infancy, they had a coalition, post-election coalition with the Fiji Unity Fiji Party, but that broke off. Now, Mr. Chaudhry received something like 5,760 votes. Had he joined, at the same token, the Unity Fiji Party leader, Mr. Savinathan Narumbe, received 6,845 votes. Compare that to the last of the MPs for Fiji First
Yes.
getting 617 votes. These two political party leaders were well above the 5,500 mark.
Yes.
What dynamics or what loss do you think there is for them not to have formed a coalition arrangement?
Yeah, well, Sashi, this is not a new point, because many of us have been writing about it, about the dilemma for small parties, that, if they don't make 5%, I mean, Graham Davis, has been, banging on, quite a long time about it, that if you
Yes.
don't get 30,000 votes, you're not going to be in parliament, so join up, with a large party, or else all your small parties get together. So being in a coalition would not have helped the Labour Party before the election. You've got to be actually in a party, right? And you must yourself get 5% of the threshold. And they chose not to. When all the indications were, the polls that had been done by Fiji Sun, however unreliable, they all showed basically that the small parties were not going to get in. It's tragic, because I even wrote to them and suggested, especially to Mr. Narube, I said, look, Savi, join up with one of the large parties, join People's Alliance or NFP, right? And you guys will form very, very strong teams. And, as I said earlier, had all these small parties just got together and formed one party before the election, they would have been on 5 seats, because they would have got 7% of all the votes. So Delpa only got 5.15, and they got three seats. So had these small parties got together, they would have got 4 seats. Had these big leaders joined the other large parties, right, they would have pulled so many votes to these large opposition parties, that the opposition parties by themselves would not have needed any coalition with SODELPA to form government. So to me, it's a tragedy. But it's when people's expectations are so high, because people sometimes go by what people say on social media, the likes and dislikes and all that. And there's kind of a strange world that I know nothing about, because I'm not on Facebook and I don't go on Twitter or anything like that, right? But there are people who have a very inflated idea about how many votes they're going to get, and when they really look at the votes they did get, they get a big shock. And honestly, maybe I think the young people in Fiji need to seriously think about the fact that there needs to be a new generation of political leaders who are in their 40s or something, who got energy, who can, see the future and create a future that is good for all people in Fiji. I mean, one thing that Frank Bainimarama has managed to do, and to me, it explains a large part of the votes he received from the Indo-Fijian community. If ever there is an analysis of the venues and the votes received, you probably find that 70-80% of Indo-Fijian voters voted for Frank. And it's all because of this one message, you all belong here, you're not Bulangi, you're all Fijians. And
And
I'm
you are
glad
all
to see.
safe. And
Yeah,
you
and
are
I'm
all
glad to
safe.
see. Yeah, and I'm glad to see that Rambuka is now also espousing that message. NFP, of course, has always had that message, and I suspect that their support is now very, very multiracial. And I suspect that Sodelpa also has now come to that point, where, hold on, okay, we are interested in indigenous Fijian affairs and all that, but our future is linked over here. We have to look after everybody. including, the business community as well, who have played such nefarious roles in Fiji, according to the donors list that was published, by the elections office. And the big names
Yes.
in there, and about how much they contributed to Fiji First Party between 2014 and 2018. I'm horrified about how they got past the, $10,000 limit for donors by using their wives and daughters and sisters and mothers and all that. Well, that's another story. You don't want to go there, Sashi.
You mentioned that it was a tragedy for the likes of leaders like Mr. Savinathan Narumbe, Mr. Mahendra Chaudhry. The sad part is, in the last few days, I've seen them all come together in the media conference. The
Yes,
leader of the Fiji Labour Party, leader of Unity Fiji, together with Professor Biman Prasad of the NFP, and People's Alliance leader Mr. Sitiveni Rambuka.
yes,
It's a great pity. We can't turn back the clock. It's a great pity that this coalition arrangement was not announced before the election for a post coalition arrangement, because
yes,
I believe that would have affected in people's votings. People
yeah.
needed to know which way Labour Party was going to go, which way Unity was going to go. Do you agree or disagree with my statement?
No, no, I agree with yours. But to me, when it was clear that splitting the votes, would not help the opposition, I think they should have either combined amongst themselves, or they should have joined the larger parties, and maybe, submerge the egos a little bit in order to work together with other leaders. The fact that they didn't do so, well, it's neither here nor there. It's all done. It's all done and dusted. And I think we just need to look to the future to see what a good government can do for Fiji.
All right, have a short break. We only have short breaks here. Unlike a radio station, I can't play a jingle, I can't play advertisements, and I can only talk. So you're listening, or you're watching, to Sashi Singh's Talking Point, and our chief guest today is Professor Wadan Narsey, an expert at economics. And let me tell you, it's an honor to have him join us today to analyze the final outcome of Fiji's elections. Admittedly, we don't know how the horse trading is going to go on, but we will talk about that towards the end of the program. Now, Wadan, I'd like to, at this stage, pick your brains and talk about the partnership that you would recommend to SODELPA and the reasons why. I mean, as you know, voters of every good democratic country needs that kind of government that can change for the better, that can provide for the populace, that can look after the affairs of the population. Floor's yours. What kind of leadership, or rather, what kind of partnership would you recommend?
Yeah, well, the thing is, I look at NFP and People's Alliance, right,
Mm-hmm.
and how they've been talking with each other and all that. I'm not privy to their internal conversations and how they have divided up ministerial positions and all that, right? But what has impressed me is their willingness to talk and collaborate. And my feeling is that Sodelpa going in, admittedly, it's going in as a junior partner, only 3 seats in parliament, right? But the fact that their decision will decide who forms government gives them an extra bargaining power.
Mm-hmm.
And you can look at them. I mean, I look at, for example, Bill Gavoka. He comes from the tourism industry. He knows the tourism industry, backwards and forwards and ins and outs and top and bottom, right? I can imagine him making, being a very, very good minister for tourism, right? And let's face it, there are other people there amongst that 3, right, who the public hasn't seen. But you know for sure that some of them will rise to the occasion. Like if you look at the Fiji First Party, there are people there who haven't got very many votes, right? But people like, say, Rosie Akbar and Premila Devi and all that, Mahendra Reddy. I mean, they have all, despite the small numbers of votes behind them, they have worked hard for 4 years and they've made an image for themselves. I'm sure the 3 Sodelpa MPs will do the same. And I'm quite sure that Professor Biman Prasad, given his knowledge of economics and what needs to be done in order to straighten the Fiji economy out and try and get some semblance of stability back, he's willing to compromise. And I think Rambuka is willing to compromise. And I think there's one aspect we haven't discussed at all, Sashi,
which is
which is the geostrategic point, that in the region, right, Australia and New Zealand have become very jittery, in my opinion, unnecessarily so, but that's my personal opinion. But they've become very jittery about China's presence, in the Pacific. And of course, when the Australian and New Zealand government applied sanctions on Fiji after the 2006 coup, Bainimarama very naturally looked towards China. And with China looking and doing deals with the Solomon Islands, I think Australians and New Zealanders are very nervous. Now, Australians and New Zealanders look at Rambuka and Professor Biman Prasad, and I think the USA shares their sentiments. They look at the fact that Fiji people have got lots of relatives in Australia and New Zealand, and you would like to have tight relations with them. And I suspect that Australia and New Zealand would be reassured to have a government like that of Rambuka, with SODELPA, with NFP, because for them that would represent political stability, of a kind which they haven't seen for 10, 15 years. And my own feeling is that although we've got intractable problems in the Fiji economy, and I wrote an article some time back where I said the next Minister of Finance or Economy is going to inherit a poison chalice, right? I didn't say that lightly.
Yes.
And Australia and New Zealand are in a position to help the Fiji government financially. And if they thought they would be getting out of it some greater stability, they would do that. And I know that Bainimarama himself began to see that, because when he decided who to go into partnership over the military training complex at Black Rock, right?
Australia.
China and Australia were bidding for it, and he went with Australia because he could see where the future benefits lay for the Fiji Republic or Fiji military forces, the soldiers, the sailors, and all that. There's a lot of work that's available, in Australian and New Zealand, military forces to keep peace and stability in the region, to help in disaster rehabilitation and all that, and to basically create a genuine South Pacific community. So, with that in mind, I suspect a government with People's Alliance, with Rambuka, with NFP, with Professor Biman Prasad, and with SODELPA, they will give Australia and New Zealand a bit of a impetus to go in and help with funding. And also with the labor market scheme to get people working in Australia, to take more people emigrating there, because I know we lose staff, right? If we lose too many nurses and caregivers, it's bad for us, right? But when you look at how much the country gets back in remittances, you wouldn't believe. I mean, Fiji earns $150,000 in sugar earnings, and that's gross, not even net. But in tourism, maybe 500-600 million. But in remittances, this last year, in 2022, we've gone over $900 million of pure cash coming in.
And by Christmas, it might even go beyond the $1 billion mark.
Oh, it may go beyond. And I tell you what, a lot of people in Fiji, the reason why they haven't felt the poverty and the lack of growth in the economy is because all their families abroad have been sending money home. And you can see that in the spending in Suva. You walk around the streets and see how people are spending their money. So to me, that is a factor that Fiji people don't think about. But me, I'm sitting here in Melbourne, and I've been looking at Australian foreign policy for the last 4 or 5 years. Hey, anybody in Fiji can look at the number of visits by Australian ministers in just this 1 year alone.
Yes.
Prime Minister Albanese, Deputy Prime Minister Richard Marles,
Penny
Wong. I mean, there's a whole long list of them, right? And I think Fiji people can look forward to a lot of good assistance from Australia and New Zealand, provided we have the right kind of government that doesn't go running off to some, foreign superpower every time they want to twist Australia's arms.
All right. You mentioned, that the partnership of People's Alliance, NFP, SODELPA. You
Yes.
mentioned that.
Yes.
With your permission, I'd like to read the letter that you sent to some members of SODELPA. May I have that permission, please?
Oh,
Let's
well,
do it.
well, go ahead and read it. I mean, it's okay.
All right. Because I've already shared that on my SSTP page.
Oh,
So it's no secret. Let me tell my viewers that Professor Wadan Narsey, due to the duty and the sense of patriotism that he has for Fiji, wrote a letter initially addressed to Rotemumu Kepa, the leader William Ngavoka, and he also sent that letter to Mary Semisoni. Subsequently, he sent it to a few more members of the Sodelpa party. And I'd like to read this letter to you. And the letter says, "Friends, I can understand your personal hurt at what, pardon me, I'll start again. Friends, I can understand your personal hurt at what has happened to you these last 4 years. I have often written to criticize the unfair treatment of Mary in the 2018 elections, and I have written in praise of Ro Temumu's great courage at facing up by herself to the thugs when the late Mr. Ngarise was removed during the 2006 coup. However, when I look at the massive work needed in so many areas to undo the huge damage that Bainimarama and Kayum have done to the Constitution and rule of law, the electoral system, the upper house, the GCC, all the state institutions, including judiciary, military, police, prisons, PSC, human rights, FICAC, etc., all the state enterprises, including the FNPF, the media, FBC, Fiji Sun, etc. Sodelpa must honestly ask itself, who should you partner with in order to tackle the tasks I have listed above? And there are far more. With Bai and Kai, they have had 16 years to build up their networks who have been feeding off taxpayers' money. They have too much to lose if Sodelpa tries to reform them, which I doubt can be done even if they offer you some lollies to convince you to join them. With People's Alliance and National Federation Party, whatever your reservations about Rambuka, and many thinking people share the same reservations, he will not be able to control his MPs the way Bai or rather Kayum did. You can count on Professor Biman and the National Federation Party with their 5 strong MPs there to strengthen Sodelpa in negotiations with the People's Alliance Party. You can count on the many good Sodelpa candidates who may not have been elected to Parliament. You only have the top 3 so far, but you ought to be called on in the reform tasks that I have listed in paragraph 2 above. You can count on the support of the good donors like Australia and New Zealand to support you. Even though it may still be unsafe for me to return to Fiji, you can count on the humble support of a Fungase like me here in Melbourne to assist you in Sodelpa with objectives I agree with. I have no influence with Rambuka and no communications other than for his support for Padma to take the late Bridgelal's ashes to Fiji. I have been strongly supporting the National Federation Party and Biman, who is my old USP student and colleague and a friend, and I have many friends in the NFP. If you need my help in your negotiations with the NFP and Biman, I'm happy to help, although he has his own strong views. I'm glad anyway that you are in a position to help form the next government of Fiji. I would be so happy if you put aside your deep personal hurt over the years at the shabby treatment you have received and did not deserve. I will not, of course, ever forget that Hot Bread Kitchen was principled and brave enough to sell my Volume 1 books alongside their daily bread. Mary, you know that you have been immortalized in that book as one of Fiji's great entrepreneurs. I hope you can also become a great stateswoman. I am not a fan of the GCC, but my personal view is that a certain chiefly lady, a genuine chief who bravely stayed to fight the battles when others around her disappeared in 2006, might also, disappeared in 2006. I wrote about her in 2009 on many blogs because of media censorship in Fiji. I would be happy to help you in any way I can. I was going to hang up writing. I was going to hang up my writing boots had Bai and Kai returned to power. Loloma and regards, Professor Wadan Narsey. Now, he wrote, as I said, to Mary Semisoni, to Ro Temumukepa, and to William Ngavoka. Mary Semisoni replied, and I read, quote, Dear Wadan, too late. SLR, Nangama, and Linda joined Sodelpa to kill it. We took them to court and won our case. What happened then is the beginning of the process of their demise. Sodelpa was glad that they and their lot, Nangama and SLR extreme, philosophy conservative, patriarchal with Linda's extreme social labor, left Sodelpa to form their own party, PAP. Their own power, philosophy, principles, and greed killed them. I will never forget in 2018 when we were told that we would be structured by decentralized turf control. Still have my stats for Lamy constituency, how the Three Musketeers stole my votes by sending in the army to do their dirty job without paying my people at 35 polling stations for training, transport, and food. Are these the values to do their dirt? Are these the values we want to teach our children to be team-building leaders that serve our voter base and values? I think not. At least FFP, at least Fiji First Party, will tell us straight in your face what their manifesto and policies are, and we, Sodelpa, to them. In that open, legal, and professional process, we can negotiate internally through bipartisan process to move forward for a democratic, social, and liberal transition process according to Sodelpa mission. Sorry, Wadan. PAP motives were and is wrong for team-building leadership in our beautiful, beloved Fiji. God bless Fiji. Kind regards, Mary. So that was the response. Having read your letter and the response, Wadan, it seems to me that there is a lot of anger, there is a mood for revenge, there is a mood for blood. What would you say?
Well, I think that was Mary's response when I first wrote to her, which is a very brief one-sentence thing, suggesting that she do a deal. They look at coalition with the People's Alliance and that was before her response was before I wrote the second letter which you read out, right? And the thing is this, Sashi, when you live in a small society like Fiji or Samoa or Tonga, the memories go back a long way, and people's, memories of hurt and injustice go back a long way. And this is how in many countries you have cycles, of revenge and all that taking place. And to be honest, when I look at Rambuka, and what he had done in the 87 coup, by the time, he came to 1996, 97, and he was working together with us, he changed the constitution, which he didn't have to do. He changed, a lot of things, right? He changed his attitudes and everything. And I suspect, that people sometimes will regret what they have done in the past. I mean, we all do. We all have regrets about how we did not behave fairly to others and all that. And I think that people in Fiji need to put the past behind them, to forget the hurts and so on, and work together for the good of everybody in Fiji. And I'm quite sure that Dr. Mary Semisoni, she is going to look at the future of all Fiji and all people in Fiji, and I think she is going to try and submerge, her own personal feelings which were there in the past, and try to move on. Although people should forgive. They should not forget, I think, but they should forgive in order to do the better thing for people, in the future. And I believe that that is what will happen in Fiji. And I believe that all decent thinking people, even guys, who are in the Fiji First Party. Look, I tell you, I mean, I have a lot of respect for people like Ioane and Eva Larua. There are people in there, who I have been friends with for ages and all that, right? And sometimes I think, hey, they made a wrong choice in life and they ended up on the wrong train. Sometimes when you get on a train, you can't get off. And there are many people like that. So, it's on all sides. And I think that Fiji is at a crossroads now, and this elections, is the crossroad. And I think there is a possibility now of having a change of government, which is good for all Fiji, good for indigenous Fijians, good for Indo-Fijians, good for everybody, and good for business people as well. I mean, even the ones, who have made a lot of money over the last 10 years because of very, very bad, auditing, of government deals and so on, right? So, unfortunately, of course, businessmen, no, they have no permanent friends. They only have permanent interests. In the next government that comes in, they will, of course, try to do the same thing with them as well. And the good thing about a new government is that there will be always people, who will say, no, I don't want to do that. It's not for the good of Fiji. So I'm hoping that that is what will happen. And I hope that everybody, including Rambuka and everybody, because Rambuka has also faced his, a set of trials and tribulations as well. It's a wonder to me, that he's still there fighting
Yes.
these battles. I mean, he's as old as I am. And, well, Biman is a little bit younger, but, well, he's sacrificed quite a lot, in his life, leaving the USP job and everything. And Mary, I mean, she runs a very successful, hot bread kitchen thing. You wonder, why don't you just retire on your savings and have a pleasant life? But she's obviously dedicated, and she wants to do good things, for Fiji as a political leader. So,
All right.
all credit to all of them. And I think that the future is looking brighter at the moment, Sashi. Don't know what may come in the next few days. Of course, people will make the decisions, and you've got to respect them.
All
But there
right.
are some old gase like me, I think, who might be ready to move on.
All right.
And
No, let's hold on. Let's hold on. Um, with credit to Dr. Mary Semisoni, that was written early in the morning. Perhaps emotions took the better of her.
yes,
But I mean, I would have been very worried had that come from William Ngavoka, because he will make it to Parliament. Three of
yes,
them will make it to Parliament.
yes,
Now, at this stage, Wadan, what I'd love you to do, I'm going to throw at you some of the things that have happened to Fiji, and I want you to summarize for me why Sodelpa should not partner with the Fiji First in light of what I'm going to throw at you. Can we do that little
yeah, yeah,
exercise?
yeah, go ahead. Yeah, if
All
I
right.
can, if I can
So,
comment sensibly on it, yeah.
um, I mean, let's start off with the rule of law in any country is absolutely paramount, and it is my opinion and my belief, and others have agreed that under the Mbai and Kai rule, the two-man rule, the rule of law in Fiji has been compromised irreparably. What is your comment, and what would you say to Sodelpa on that account?
Well, I have to agree with you on that, Sashi. And to me, there's no other event that exemplifies that so much as the coup, the treasonous coup against the late Garase's government, multi-party government of SDL and Fiji Labour Party. To me, it was absolutely clear-cut that there was no reason for the coup. Bainimarama alleged that there was corruption, and 16 years later, he's never provided proof. And in fact, there's far worse things have happened under his rule than ever happened under Garase. The worst thing they could prove with Garase was that he bought some shares, in Fijian Holdings
Yeah.
Limited when he was the director of the development bank, right? And he was buying it, of course, for the family and for the community company. But you look at how much money Bainimarama has personally made since he has been prime minister, bumping his salary up to $350,000 and more, paying himself perks, of $3,000 a day for every day he was out of Fiji. I mean, he would have made $1 million probably every year or close to that. Garase never ever did that. Now, when he was treasonously removed, I was horrified that the RFMF just went in behind Bainimarama and supported that removal of government. And of course, some of them got themselves into top ministerial positions as well. To me, that was so horrible that they did this to the late Garase. In 87, oh, we don't want this India prime minister, right? 2000, we don't want this India prime minister. By the time they had done all those coups, in 2006, they did it to one of their own persons, one of their own indigenous Fijian leaders, who, in my opinion, he may have had some strong views about helping indigenous Fijians, right? And why not? If you look at the Fiji economy, what do indigenous Fijian businesses have in the Fiji economy? What share do they have? They have bugger all. So to me, what Garase was trying to do was a positive thing. Maybe, he may have needed to have a better image control, than what he had. But for him to be removed, he was a guy who was willing to bring in the Fiji Labour Party into his multi-party government, except that Mahen Chaudhry stayed out. And Mahen
Yes,
Chaudhry's president, Jackie Koroi, asked the military to do a coup. I mean, there's another story down there, which is, I don't want
that's
to
for
go
another
down that
day.
path. Yeah,
That's for
but
another day.
yeah, but the thing is that the rule of law was totally trashed in 2006. The entire constitution was removed, and actually, to be honest, that constitution, in my opinion, is still alive. The 97 one. Maybe we can, change the electoral system and all that, because Bainimarama's proportional system was a little bit of an improvement, though not completely, right? But that constitution is still in place, and to me, that injustice, that breakdown of rule of law was so extreme, because after that, the government of Bainimarama and Qayyum changed every aspect of the law to suit themselves, removed the upper house, appointed people in the judiciary. Can you imagine appointing a judge, who takes a comment in a Twitter account which is correcting somebody's spelling and says you're bringing a scandal upon the judiciary and the whole judiciary is going to collapse? Just because a citizen pointed out to a judge, hey, sir, your honor, your highness, or whatever it is they call them, right? Didn't you mean injunction rather than injection? And the judge
Yes.
found this person guilty. I mean, oh, goodness gracious. So, I mean, there's so many other things. Civil servants have been sacked, like, Kemueli Nengama and all that. Permanent secretaries have been sent packing in local, then expatriate, and so on, right? I mean, you look at the Fiji Human Rights and Anti-Discrimination Commission. They ignore all the huge, offenses taking place against human rights. And this guy, Ashwin Raj, a thorough disgrace, right? Who could not even get a small, low-level job at USP without the assistance of two professors of economics, right? He's now the permanent secretary of some ministry of women, jeepers, what competence does he have? So you look at all the things that have been happening in Fiji, the rule of law has totally broken down.
All right.
And it
So,
has to be fixed. It has to be fixed.
all right. Another area that perhaps SODELPA should take heed of, and that is freedom of expression, freedom of publication in terms of media.
Yes, yes.
What's the message to SODELPA there?
Well, SODELPA needs to understand. I mean, they can see it. I mean, they've got people who have been observing it. Before these people tightened their grip on the media and started prosecuting publishers. That guy Hank Arts. He was being charged with things. Poor Fred Wesley was, charged, given a $400,000 fine and 6 months of suspended jail sentence. And all the journalists are frightened to ask questions, right? And you've got two media organizations, the FBC, which is headed by the brother of the Attorney General, right? And the Fiji Sun, which gets financial subsidies from the government and advertising and all that. And they've completely distorted the media climate in Fiji. There's no such thing as a free media in Fiji. And even things that I write for the Fiji Times, people have no idea that every article I've written has to be vetted by a lawyer, a legal firm. Before it
that
can
is
go
why-
into print.
and
That's
that
been
is
happening
why-
for 7 years, yeah.
And that is
Even
why
now.
that is why I started the SSTP program.
Yes.
Because
Well, your program would not have been able to run in Fiji, mate.
well,
You can be sure
that's
of that.
true. That
Yeah.
is absolutely true. But because of the curtailment of media freedom in Fiji, I
Yes.
decided to start this program. Okay, so that's a very, very valid point that you've made there. Now, another very important point for SODELPA to consider, I believe, is that look, the last 8 years, we have known that in terms of the Fiji First government, it's a two-man show, and other ministers are not allowed to rise and shine and to talk about their portfolios and to talk about programs, etc. They have had, let's say, 16 years to build this network up. If SODELPA joined the Fiji First Party, how would they get around this two-man show? What would you say to SODELPA?
If they join the Fiji First,
Yes.
well, I mean, three MPs in the Fiji First, to be honest, they have no hope in hell of tackling all the big problems that I've listed which the two-man show have already controlled for 8 years and more. So I mean, whatever objectives the SODELPA people have, right? uh, they cannot achieve any of those objectives in a partnership with Fiji First Party. Full stop. I mean, to address all those problems would mean that you would have to undo everything that two-man show has created for the last 8 years, and they have created it for a purpose. They're not suddenly going to say, "Oh, let's dismantle all these stuff over here and let's go back, to ground zero again." They're not going to do that. And SODELPA needs to think. Of course, they will offer SODELPA a deputy prime ministership, as an incentive. Hey, but are you going to achieve all the other reforms that the people of Fiji, and particularly your supporters, right, are asking you to do? And I mean, if you want to talk in ethnic terms, Sashi, right, most of SODELPA's supporters would be indigenous Fijian, and most of supporters of People's Alliance will be indigenous Fijians. And for them to achieve what the indigenous Fijian people want done for them, they need to work together, and it's not going to happen with the People's Alliance. I mean, you look at some things which they have done, right? For example, banning the Fijian language from Parliament. Oh
Yes.
wow. Oh wow. This is the only language that's indigenous to Fijian people. Hindi is everywhere in the world, English is everywhere in the world. How dare you? If you ban the Indian languages from parliaments in India, there'd be hartal in every state.
Hartal. Hartal means
Yes.
a big protest,
No,
strike.
street protests,
Uh,
burnings, and
uh,
everything,
yes,
right? Okay.
absolutely.
Imagine now. Imagine removing the Ratu Sukuna Day.
Yes.
I mean, this guy, Ratu Sukuna, I mean, he's one of the famous guys, in World War One, right? He wanted to join the British military and they wouldn't join him because of their racist policies. And he went and joined, the French army. And he won a huge military decoration with the French. And yet, he was prepared to sacrifice everything because he believed in fighting for the West against, the atrocities that the Germans and the Japanese were committing then. He came back a hero. He did all these things. Now, I know there are people, who don't agree with everything that Ratu Sukuna did, because some people believe that, he may have kept down commoners a bit where he didn't give them enough space to grow. So, Sitiveni Ratuva, Professor Ratuva has got some very strong views about that, right? But despite all that, here was a Fiji hero. And he
Yes.
was a hero from the time of the old colonial days. And he had a public holiday in his name, and we got rid of that. And instead, we've got a holiday for these 2013 pieces of paper called the Constitution, which has been never approved by any parliament, right? Any referendum or anything. So when I look at the objectives of SODELPA, right? The GCC. Look, I am not a big fan of the GCC, because to be honest, when Beni Marama told them to go away and sit under the mango tree and drink homebrew, they quietly went away. It was people like Rotemu Mukepa and them, who fought back publicly and stood up to the forces, the military and the police, who went to arrest her in the middle of the night. A decent middle-aged woman who was expressing her right to host the Methodist Church, annual general meeting and all that, right? So when you look at SODELPA's objectives, if they want to bring back the GCC and let the GCC have a bit of a say, in the upper house as a house of review and all that, no big deal. Although I personally don't think that they're up to anything. In fact, some of the big high chiefs in Fiji, they have done enormous damage to Fijian people by signing military decrees, by becoming presidents and by becoming speakers of the house, where they have squashed indigenous Fijian members of parliament. So SODELPA's objectives about the GCC and all that, okay, let's do it within reason. We don't want them to totally overthrow, and control power and all that. But, they have some legitimate grievances, which People's Alliance and NFP, ought to, and I'm sure they will address.
Brings me to another point. In his press conference this afternoon, the leader of SODELPA, William Ngavoka, made a specific point that the E-Toke was supposedly paramount. Their well-being is supposedly paramount. Having said that, if SODELPA joins the Fiji First Party, do you think that if they proposed any reforms with regards to the E-Toke, whether it will be entertained in the first place, by the two-man rule, and whether they will be successful in bringing any implementations.
Well, you look at the Fiji First Party already. They removed the Fijian language from Parliament, right? The Itoke language, right? When Kemueli Nangama and the Bureau of Stats came out with incidents of poverty statistics to show that indigenous Fijians were the poorest, he got the sack. Now, I can
Yes.
personally say that when the late Garase was Prime Minister, he asked me to give presentations to his cabinet where I went and took my facts on poverty and showed them that according to the incidence of poverty, which is the percentage of people who are poor, the Indo-Fijians were the poorest and they needed help, right? But in terms of total quantity of poverty alleviation resources, because indigenous Fijians were more in terms of population than Indo-Fijians, you would end up giving more resources to indigenous Fijians. And, he was willing to consider that. Whereas everybody calls him ethno-nationalist. So just because, you address Itoke issues doesn't make you a racist. All you're saying was, please, don't marginalize them. And I even remember, Sashi, writing a paper when Mr. Garase was being, charged in Parliament. I said, look, if you want to address the imbalance in economic power in Fiji between indigenous Fijians and Indo-Fijians, however bad it might sound, you've got to assist rich Fijians become richer. I gave that paper to his lawyer to use. I don't know whether he used it or not, because the real gap, in the economy is at the top, where you got the Tapus and the Vinod Patels and the R.C. Manubais and C.J. Patels and that. And on the other side, all you've got is Fijian Holdings Limited, not individual Fijian entrepreneurs. And that's where you've got to help people. You've got to help people like Mary Semisoni and others to succeed and become big in business. So if SODELPA wants to help the Itoke cause, you're not going to get much fun. You're not going to get much joy out of the Fiji First Party.
Yes, because it's a two-man rock and roll show. There's no room for a third dancer in that door play.
Well,
Now,
I suspect Bill Gavoka can dance a few steps. I think I've seen him.
all right, let's reverse the scenario. What are the advantages if SODELPA enters into an alliance with the People's Alliance and the National Federation Party? First of all, let me ask you, Mr. Sitiveni Rambuka, obviously, I don't think he will micromanage either SODELPA or any of his cabinet ministers. Your thoughts?
No. One thing that I did check up on, not having was what is the geographical reach of People's Alliance Party? And one of the things that always bothered me, and I've written quite a lot about it, is that the electoral system has got no constituencies. So people out there, all over Fiji, they don't have a feel that this MP is answerable to them. And one of the things that I think Rambuka has done in his choice of candidates for the election, they've got people from all over Fiji. And I'm sure SODELPA, they've got candidates from all over Fiji. So one thing that, they can expect, right, is that there's going to be within cabinet and internal discussions, no people's interests are going to be left behind just because there's a two-man show who decides what should happen everywhere in Fiji. And they must be seen to be the ones doing everything, You notice, I tell you what, I've always been irritated with my journalism friends at the School of Journalism in USP. And I've said to them often, why don't you do a quantitative analysis since the independence of how many pages or what proposed percentage of pages and photos are given over to our leaders, and compare the leaders from independence, from the days of Ratumara to now. And you will get a shocking graph about how one or two individuals have suddenly acquired prominence in the media. It'll show it quantitatively, scientifically. You don't have to express your opinion. And that hasn't been done. So my feeling is that if in an alliance between People's Alliance and NFP and SODELPA, every person who is part of that partnership team are going to have a presence representing their people's interests. That kind of thing, of course, hasn't happened I mean, you got a party that has been in power for 16 years. They've got a guy who's a PhD in economics, and he did his PhD on the sugar industry. He's never been given responsibility for the sugar industry.
Yes,
Can you
indeed.
imagine? I mean, gee.
Yeah, that's yeah. Well, then have a little break. Have a drink of water. We will go on the home stretch to try and conclude today's interview.
I should
Let
I
me.
should charge you. I should charge you by the hour, Sashi.
No, this is
At
this is
your at
the
your solicitor's rates.
this this is the love we have for Fiji. And speaking of which, Ray Chetty, you're entitled to your opinion, my friend. For you to say that let the democratic process of who, what, and when a new government is formed play out without undue interference. Let me tell you, Mr. Chetty, we are not interfering with Fiji. What my show, Sashi Singh's Talking Point, is doing is that Fiji media does not touch on or does not discuss. So, Mr. Chetty, you're entitled to your opinion. We will keep talking. We will keep suggesting what should be done in Fiji. And bottom line is, as I used to say in my radio days, if you don't like it, switch off. Like it, keep listening. And also, Arvind Sharma, you've made a comment. This two men talking from outside of Fiji, please go and talk in Fiji. Arvind Sharma, don't be an idiot in life. You know, Arvind, when wisdom was chasing you, you were always faster. Listen to that. When wisdom was chasing you, Arvind Sharma, you just happened to be so much faster. Arvind Sharma, let me tell you, I am a Fiji citizen. I need to know what happens in Fiji. I voted in this election. Again, don't
Me
like
too.
it. Pardon, sorry, Vardhan?
Me too. I voted in the election.
Yes, we did. And that is why we are passionate. So the likes of Arvind Sharma don't like it, lump it. Go and take a flying jump. I will do this program for my dedicated viewers. And we've got 12,500, very near to 13,000. So don't like it? Goodbye to you. See you later. Cheerio. Nisa Mode. Bye bye. All right, my friend Wadan, let me just touch on a couple more things. So I discuss Mr. Sitiveni Rambuka not micromanaging his cabinet ministers or members of SODELPA. They'll have 3 seats. Let me talk about Professor Biman Prasad, the coalition partner of SODELPA. Now, I'm sure SODELPA can count on Professor Biman Prasad and his 5-strong NFP team to strengthen SODELPA in terms of reforms, etc. Your views?
Well, I think that NFP would be very, very considerate, of Sodelpa's views, because that's the nature of NFP. I mean, I look at the people who are there. There's Pio Tikunduandua, there is Agni Deo Singh, who is a unionist and a teacher and all that. You've got Sashi Kiran, a social worker, who's had so much acclaim, publicly because of her going into politics, when she could have just stayed with her job, comfortable, cushy job, secure job, earning a good income. Instead, she actually risked all that by standing for parliament. And I'm glad to see that she's one of the 5, who have managed
Yes.
to get in. So all of these people are very, very cooperative kind of people. I mean, let's remember, when Pio Tikunduandua, was being assaulted, outside the precincts of Parliament by a certain person, right? He didn't react in violence. Although as a military officer, he could have reacted in violence as well. And of course, the Speaker of the House, let off the other side and chose to punish him, which tells you as much more about the Speaker of the House than about Pio Tikunduandua. So here you've got three persons. You've got people who are very cooperative people, and I think Sodelpa can work together with them. And if the NFP people have to make a sacrifice, well, dare I say, and I suspect that my friend Professor Biman Prasad, even though he's got more seats in Parliament than Sodelpa, if Sodelpa were to say, well, we want to be Deputy Prime Minister, and I'm quite sure Biman would consider it very, very favorably, because he's not a power-hungry person, he's got far more bigger fish to fry in terms of the work that needs to be done.
You know,
So,
if Professor Biman Prasad ever made that sacrifice, the
well, look,
only
mate.
reason, I beg your pardon.
Look, I tell you what, as a professor of economics and as a dean at the University of the South Pacific, he would have been in excess of $200,000 a year salary and all that, going around the world everywhere, doing work that he enjoys doing without the headache of being attacked in Parliament, right? Or being attacked outside of Parliament. I mean, you look at what he has come through, he and his wife, in the last few months. I mean, my God, and I would be thinking, oh my God, do I want this in my life, right? So he sacrificed a lot, and to sacrifice being deputy prime minister, no big deal. I mean, if I were actually Mr. Rambuka, oh gee, I would just say, hey, okay, let's have two deputy prime ministers.
I was just coming to that. Now, if I mean, let's face it, if Professor Biman Prasad was to sacrifice a deputy prime minister position and allow that position to go to Mr. Ngavoka from the Sodelpa party, let me tell you that Biman Prasad would do that for the love of the country, that Fiji can get a government of national unity in terms of the three-party alliance, so that inroads could be made for good governance, the rule of law, the judiciary, tackling the poverty issues, all the things that people have been talking about in terms of bringing better life for the people of Fiji. But as you say, there's nothing stopping having two deputy prime ministers.
Yeah, and
Um,
let's remember also, Sashi,
mm,
it's important, to give the message to all communities in Fiji that the leadership of the government is multiracial.
well,
To have a,
there
to
you
have
go.
have an important, intelligent Indo-Fijian at the top who is not a stooge, who's got his own independent opinion and everything, right? It would be a very, very good plus for People's Alliance. And I mean, I don't know. I mean, I was sitting in Melbourne and looking at where Rambuka was going during the election campaigns.
Mm,
He was devoting a lot of time and effort towards Indo-Fijian communities because he cared
yes.
about what they thought. And of course, a cynic could say, well, he only wanted their votes, right? But, there are other ways of getting people votes. You give them freebies and all that, promise them everything under the sun, and they'll vote for you. But, having good Indo-Fijian leaders at the top is important. Having women leaders at the top is important. People like Sashi Kiran and them, right? So, I mean, I think they've got a very, very good team which they can present to all of Fiji.
And talking of Mr. Rambuka and breaking that ethnic divide, I mean, I think one of the winners of this election was his TikTok with Sanjeshni. I mean, that was an absolute ripper. And Sitiveni Rambuka, Mr. Rambuka, if you're watching this program, and Sanjeshni, if you're watching it, brilliant. You two were absolutely brilliant. Well,
Yeah.
then, as we come to the end, I said to you that we will talk about Sodelpa's demands. Um, Look, when I look at that, well, one of the listed items in their manifesto was to get back the GCC. I know your thoughts on the GCC, but
Yeah.
that was one of the listed items in the manifesto. Whereas when you compare that with the Fiji First, they don't want. They kicked the GCC out. So when you look at their demands, how would you address what should be the Sodelpa Party's main demands apart from deputy prime ministership?
Yeah, well, to be honest, I think one of these is Sadelpas, I think it's the secretary or something. He has said that yes, the GCC things are important, but they cared more about the bread and butter issues for ordinary indigenous Fijians. I think it was that Leonard Tassi, is it the secretary, general secretary of Sadelpa? He said that. So there are different views within the Sadelpa, but look, to be honest, it is not a deal breaker issue. And I can
Right.
imagine, for example, a GCC, right, which is transformed into something which is progressive, has more young people, more educated people. They can be in the upper house, but be one factor in the upper house, which can also include business people from the business community, the professionals, doctors, lawyers, and all that. So it is a genuine apolitical house of review. of whatever
Mhm.
the lower house does. So the GCC, I mean, let's face it. I mean, some economists, and I'm not one of them, feel that, look, there's a big globalized world out there. Everybody go there and fight for yourself. Forget about your tradition, your culture, and all that. And I mean, to be honest, there are many leaders, Fijian leaders, who have been very, very good Fijian leaders, good chiefs. Rotomumi is one of them, right? And I think Ratumara was a great leader. Ratu Peneya was a great leader, right? And there are a whole lot of them. There are others actually who weren't all that good. I mean, they just occupied positions. They collected the lease monies and things, and basically did nothing for the ordinary people. And one of the good things that I think Beni Marama tried to do was to share the lease money equally, between everybody in the Matangali, the landowning unit. And I think that if there is any Fijian votes for Beni Marama, I suspect a lot of it is due to the fact that there are many commoners who themselves, want to see a reform of Fijian institutions. So these are not deal breakers. I think that
Yes.
both Rambuka and Biman can go along with that, within reason. And I don't think Sadelpa will make extreme demands on them either. I think I think what they're asking for is representation on boards and all that, and that's not a bad thing. I mean, at the moment, if you look at the two-man team, you look at all the people they've put on the boards, it's their chamchas, they're cronies, their
They're
proteges.
lackeys. They're lackeys.
They're lackeys, yeah. And
Mm.
and and it has had some disastrous impacts on some boards. It's too much to go into, but look at the FNPF, Fiji Roads Authority, and all this. Oh man, the amount of losses that the taxpayers have suffered because these people have not done their duty by the Fiji taxpayers, right? So if Sodelpa wants to have representation on boards, by all means, you can balance it out between People's Alliance and NFP and Sodelpa. There was a time when people used to say that no board member should be present on more than one board.
Yes.
Well, when Beni Marama and Kayum come in, they started at the beginning talking about that, and then very slowly they shifted to putting their mates on all the important boards so they could control everything. So
That's
if
right.
if Sodelpa says, well, we'd like to nominate people to boards, NFP likes to nominate people to land, I think there'll be a good diverse board representation across the country. It's
You
good
know,
for
you
it'll be good for democracy.
you've just summed it up so beautifully. Good for democracy. That's something that has been lacking in Fiji for the best part of 16 odd
16
years.
years, yes, yeah.
Yeah, that has been lacking. And it's going to be like a breath of fresh air that democracy is restored in the parliamentary chambers, that things like Standing Order 51, where legislation is just not rushed through, where proper consultation with the people takes place,
Yes,
where bipartisan, well, forget bipartisan, they'll be in the opposition if this coalition works, that this multi party cabinet can make decisions and they can take time. I mean, Bill Gavoka has come and said, we'll probably take 2 weeks to make up our minds. And that means he's going to be consulting people. Well, do that in Parliament as well. Become
yes,
the
yes,
Deputy Prime Minister, consult your constituency, look, let your other MPs go out and seek the constituency. I mean, I know it's a national constituency. Well, then, um, you mentioned donors like Australia, New Zealand, US.
yes.
Um, the important thing is, and I'm afraid I must have been looking at something. I don't know whether I missed this. Did you mention, or have I missed, or am I able to make this point? Australia, New Zealand, US, they don't have a fear of Rambuka or Professor Prasad. Comments on that?
Yeah, well, they're afraid of any politician in the Pacific who starts to blackmail them into giving more aid by doing deals with powers who are not part of the South Pacific, right? And I must emphasize one little thing, that people don't think about. There's about three. There used to be 3,000 soldiers in the British Army, Fijian soldiers.
Mm-hmm.
And they had jobs, good income. Some of them became British citizens afterwards and all that. I actually feel that there is a similar opportunity available for Fijian soldiers and sailors and all that with the Australian, New Zealand armies and navies. For our soldiers and sailors to earn good income from Australia and New Zealand being part of the grand South Pacific Defense, compact. But they would only do that if they felt comfortable with the leadership.
That's right.
And if they're not comfortable with the leadership, then I think they're not good. And we, I think, are missing out on a very, very good opportunity for incomes. Of course, it's not just Fiji. Tuvalu, for example, and Kiribati have got some of the best sailors in the world. And I reckon they could be fantastic assets for Australia and New Zealand, except that these people there have not had the vision to see how they can use them. But I think Fiji can be used a lot more. I think Professor Prasad and Sitiveni Rambuka, I think they will have very good relations with Australia and New Zealand. I mean, Biman, of course, has had this for years through his academic work and with ANU. I mean, ANU used to come and do all these development dialogues, at USP for decades now. And so, we are all used to working together with Australian and New Zealand academics. And that kind of a cooperation could extend right across the board into sports, into culture, into anything you want to think of, including things like working in aged care homes in Australia, or picking fruit and all that, which has been such a huge boon to Pacific Island countries, especially during COVID. So
All right.
Australia and New Zealand, look kindly upon the People's Alliance and upon the NFP.
Well, that's why
And
they
I think
call it.
also SADELPA, I think, right? Yeah.
Yeah, that's why they call it the Pacific Neighborhood.
Yeah.
All
And
right.
I mean,
Let's look at the DONT or the DHONT system of voting,
yeah,
as opposed to the proportional voting system.
yeah,
Your comments on that now that we've had this election.
yeah.
I know you.
Well, I tell you what, I won't labor the point, because a lot of countries in the world have the DHON system, and I explain it I think I try to explain it on my website. There's a post there which people can go and look at. And essentially, the allocation I said earlier of 26 seats to FFP, right, by the DHON system, if you did it on a proportional basis in terms of the percentage of all the votes cast, going for FFP, for People's Alliance, NFP, and SADELPA, FFP would have got only 25 seats, 25.3.
Yes.
People's Alliance would have got 21.3. Whereas the DHON system, the way it does is it gives an extra one to Fiji First in this case. So people can go and look at the article I have on my website. But look, in Australia, you get all kinds of disproportionate results because of the alternative vote system here, right? Even worse than Fiji, in Queensland, in Victoria, and all that. But when you get disproportionate results, you don't have a military coup.
Yes.
People have rules. They agree to vote according to the rules. The votes are counted according to the rules. And once you've accepted the rules, you accept the result. So accept the DHON thing for the moment, right? Maybe, when the new government comes in, we have a change in the electoral system, a reform that might be one of the priorities. Have a system of constituencies. Keep the proportional system, which Bainimarama and Qayyum introduced, because that's an important element. And maybe have a closed list system, right, where parties give a closed list, which means you can alternate men and women, on your list. And that will make sure, for certain, that everybody on that list, there'll be a gender balance. That some people like Shamima Ali and others have been calling for, why are there no more women, not more women in parliament? Well, they should go and ask their own women voters, why are you not voting for women in parliament, right? And one of the things that the list system can do, it can force political leaders to put more women into parliament because of the position they give them in the list. But that's ahead. At the moment, forget about the DHON system. If you're interested, read it on my thing. But the proportional system is a very, very fair system. And New Zealand has a wonderful system, right?
Yes.
Where not only do they have constituencies, including special constituencies for Maori, right? They also have a proportional list system, which ensures that the total result in the country is really, really proportional. And you don't have the huge injustices. Mind you, they also had a little bit of a threshold problem where one election, poor Winston Peters could not get elected.
Winston Peters. Yes. Well, then, as we come to concluding tonight's program, what would your advice be to Bill Gawalkar and the SADELPA party?
Well, I would suggest to them, don't waste too much time. Talk amongst your colleagues, not just the successful ones, but also all the people who stood in the election. Talk to your party people. Talk to your communities, where you got your most votes from. And look, you can now, every party can go and look at the results by venue, right? Which also gives the party results, and you can tell exactly which venues you got your support from, and they should add that up, and they should go to those communities and say, well, look, what would you advise? We care about what you think, as opposed to two other guys who never ask their communities. And what I would say is, don't mess around for too long, because it's not good for uncertainty. It's not for a country. It's not good for a country to have uncertainty. It's not good for the military, it's not good for the police, and it's not really good for the political parties themselves. Make a quick decision, and get a new government in place, whether it's the old one, or new one, depending on depending on whoever you want to go with. Ultimately, they of course have the right to make the decision. And let me tell you this, man. uh, uh, People, when they make decisions like this, if they make the wrong decisions, right, history will record that they made the wrong decisions despite all the mess that was going on. And when they had a chance to have something better in place, for their own selfish greed, because of incentives they were given, because of the lollies they were given, they went one way with people who have obviously never showed any respect for collaboration and consultation and cooperation. So people will not remember them kindly if they make the wrong choice. By all means, squeeze the most you can out of people's alliance and NFP, but don't do it. Don't do it at the expense of the people of Fiji for the next 4 years.
Wadan, a few people have been absolutely delighted with your contribution on SSTP this evening, and a few have asked, what is your favorite pub in Fiji? They'd like to shout you a beer.
What's the favorite?
What's your favorite pub in Fiji? They'd like to shout you a beer.
Oh, favorite pub in Fiji. I don't go to Fiji, and I haven't been to Fiji for 5 years. It's too dangerous for me to go back there. I
Yes.
was sacked from USP because of what I was writing about the attacks on the FNPF and the halving of pensioners' pensions, which was an illegal thing passed by military decree signed by this president and high chief. I hope they reverse that. I might get some of my pension money back. Yeah. No, but,
um,
but pubs. I don't even go to pubs here, Sashi, because
yes, I
here,
know.
unlike Fiji, you can't go out and get drunk and drive home.
Well, absolutely. Any final concluding words? I've asked you about
No, not
Ebola.
really. It'll be great for me to go back home. But one thing I was so glad about, and that was a communication I did have with Rambuka,
Mhm.
which was that when he was in New Zealand, he reassured my sister, Dr. Padmalal, that if
Yes.
they came into government, they would welcome her and her children back with the ashes of the late Professor Brijlal to be
Mm.
scattered in Tambia, where he comes from. And I think that that was the communication I had from him, and I was very, very happy to receive that. Uh, so I hope that happens, because the people of Indian origin in Fiji and all the Girmitia organizations, the Arya Samaj, Sanatan Dharam, to me, I have always been disturbed that they have never stood up in public and fought for the right of Professor Brijlal to return to Fiji when he was alive, and for the right of Dr. Padma Narsilal to go back, because all that happens is she just happens to be the wife, of Dr. Brijlal, and maybe worse still, maybe she's my sister.
Well, you've made that disclosure because I was just going to say that Dr. Padmalal, the wife of the late Dr. Brijlal, is the sister of Professor Wadan Narsey, and we do acknowledge that Mr. Sitiveni Rambuka went on record and said that he will allow Dr. Padmalal to travel to Fiji with the ashes of her late husband so she can do the final rites in Tambia, where Professor Brijlal wanted to be laid down. That is indeed a high note to finish on. Let me just add one thing to my viewers. Some of you are going away because Wadan is about to say goodbye. Stay on because I'm going to share something very interesting with you before you go. But you wanted to say something else, Professor?
One thing I might like to do at some stage is, when it's safe to go back, is to go home and play some golf play some golf with some of my friends. I haven't done that because people might not know, but 10, 15 years ago, I represented Fiji in a national seniors golf tournament here in Australia. It was in Melbourne at Moona Links. And I came with Mohammad Rafiq, and Mosese Wanga Wono Wono was our manager. And I had Bira Gounder from Lambasa. So, we came and represented Fiji here in golf. So I might like to go back and play golf someday, maybe have a game with Prime Minister Rambuka.
And let me add also, viewers who are in Fiji, apart from playing golf, I'm sure you'd like to go to the Mbilulevu Club. You'd also
Oh,
like to, hang on, let me finish this. I'm sure you'd like to go to the Mbilulevu Club, also meet up with our good friend Adish Narayan. And
Adish
I
Naidu.
mean, Adish Naidu, sorry. Let me tell you, folks, Professor Wadan is a musician as well, plays a very mean mouth organ. And you remember those Bilo Levu days?
Yeah, yeah, they're not playing anymore. I'm afraid that group split because of internal politics. Same problem, eh? Yeah, but
But
my friend Adish Naidu, and they're still playing all their music together in their groups and things. And it's one thing I do miss over here, not having a musical group to play with. Although there's a friend of mine over here, uh, uh, who I used to play with in Fiji as well. He's a bajania too. He's a big bajania, and he lives somewhere in Melbourne. And he invited me once, but I don't drive at night and all that, so I didn't go. But
all right. Well,
yeah,
there's a lot to look forward to, whether people like you and I go back to Fiji or not. We voted. We exercised our right to vote. Professor Wadan Narsey, I sincerely thank you. I thank you for the time you've taken today, for being part of this program, and you've sacrificed your family time. And
oh,
I wish you a very Merry Christmas, a Happy New Year. But
yeah.
don't be surprised if Sashi Singh rings you in the next few days to pick your brains again.
Well, I tell you what, though, I think it would have been good if you could have got Graham Davis on, because
Oh,
he's been maintaining a Facebook blog and all that, which has done a lot of good work for democracy and all that. And if you can get him back to come and speak on your program, I mean, he has got some very, very perceptive observations, because he was an inside man, for so many years, doing the public relations work for Benny Marama and Ayaz. So, I mean, I'm a critic, so you can expect criticism from me. But when you get it from somebody like Graham Davis, he's a very respected person, in his own right. I think the viewers might like that.
well, in fact, I did say in this morning's program that I was going to contact Graham Davis. I did, but Graham had something of a very personal nature today, which I cannot share with my viewers,
Yeah, yeah.
with respect to Graham. But he apologized for not being able to present himself in today's program. But like you say, in the next few days, we'll get a clearer indication. And I will be making an announcement just before I sign off. But unless you've thought of something else, Professor
No, no.
Narsi,
Thank you.
well, thank you very
Menagawakalabo.
much.
Yeah, Menagawakalabo.
Thank you so much. God bless you. And I'll be phoning you shortly. Cheers. Thank you. Bye bye.
Cheers.
Well, there you have it. We've got the formal announcements today. And a very, very big thank you to Professor Wadan Narsey for spending time with me this afternoon and agreeing to analyze the results we've had so far. Let me tell you that we're entering into that traditional season. Christmas is just a week away from today. And this is the surprise that I wanted to share with you. Because Fiji is at that crossroads. Oh, by the way, all those people sending your emojis, thank you very much. Your love hearts, your likes, and those people who've sent stars this afternoon, thank you very much. Really, really appreciate that. Audrey DeMoon says, very appreciative of this informative program. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, Audrey. You're a very dedicated viewer. Appreciate that. Uh, Also, awesome interview. God bless from Tale Tauke. Minavalevu Tale. Reshma Singh is in Fiji. Says, God bless. Wills McCaig, I think, if I'm not wrong, from Savu Savu, says season's greetings to PEP, NFP, and Sodelpa. Naresh Kumar is in Suva. Good on you guys. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. Um, Also, other comments from Preetham Karan, very interesting. Narendra Singh says, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. And look, it's been a wonderful occasion to talk to Professor Narsey. Now, as I said, traditional season. Today is supposedly our last broadcast for the year. SSTP, with today's broadcast, has completed 50 episodes since the day we began on the 21st of November, 2021. First of all, this program would not be possible without my very dedicated and supportive SSTP team. So, to Roma and to Beta Vince, thank you very, very much for that. Right throughout when we started, we had Nikhil Singh and Dennis Rounds join me as two co-commentators on the show. Dennis dropped out, but we've had Nikhil Singh, who has been with me right throughout. Today, of course, Nikhil Singh is celebrating his wedding anniversary, and he asked for a pass, and I gladly gave him a pass because let's face it, a wedding anniversary is a very, very important celebration in a couple's life. So to Nikhil and to your better half, Nikhil, wishing you all the very best. And by God's good grace, may you and your good wife have a wonderful wedded life and celebrate many, many more wedding anniversaries along the way. So, congratulations on your wedding anniversary and all the very best. This show would not be possible without the viewers. And to all of you, I look into your eyes and I say, a big Vinaka Vakalevu, Dhanyavad, thank you very much for being part and parcel of SSTP. I remember when we started on the 21st of November, 2021, we just had a handful of people following us. Today, we're very close to hitting that 13,000 mark. However, our weekly episodes touch at least 150, 160. I checked yesterday. We were hitting 169,000. The reach was 169,000 people. Awesome. I'd like to take this opportunity as we try to finish this year's broadcast to say a big, big thank you to all our chief guests. Episode 1 with Graham Everett Leong, to the last episode we had last week with all our opposition leaders. And then, of course, today with Professor Wadan Narsey making his second appearance on SSTP. Without guests, ladies and gentlemen, this program would not be possible. And again, I put as a disclaimer, if you are wondering why in 50 episodes I have not had one member of the Fiji First Party, let me tell you, it has not been for lack of trying. I have sent invitations to the Attorney General. I have sent invitations via an intermediary of the Attorney General. I have sent invitations to the Prime Minister's office. And I have sent invitations to some permanent secretaries and also to some ministers. And the answer has been a big fat zero. No response, no courtesy of a reply. And as I have said in past programs, this program will continue with or without the presence of the Fiji First Party or the former government. Well, the surprise I want to say to you is that we go into a Christmas break. Normally, I would not be back until January. But because Fiji is at that crossroads, if there is any major announcement in the next day or two, I promise you, we will host a very special episode of SSTP. So the important thing is if you are not following SSTP, go and follow SSTP, like the page, become a new follower, And when we do announce that we're coming in with a special program in the next few days, you'll be the first to know. So you'll be able to tune in, you'll be able to watch. And I'm prepared to sacrifice my time, my patience, and come and do a special program so we know where Fiji is heading and how Fiji is going to end up, at least for the next 4 years. So, those of you who've posted your comments, your love hearts, your likes, your stars, a big vinaka vakalevu, thank you so much. And as I said, when the government is announced, we will try to jack up interviews with the political players of the moment. 1 week in politics is a long, long time, ladies and gentlemen. So let's just keep watching and let's just keep enjoying the program. As I said, I hope to see you in the new year, but if there's something of major importance, I'll be back. So, in finishing, we have Christmas next Sunday. On behalf of the entire team of SSTP, may I take this opportunity in wishing each one of you a very, very Merry Christmas. And if I don't see you in the next week, then I also take this opportunity in wishing you a very happy, prosperous, safe, joyous, and rewarding New Year. On the 31st of December, it's my anniversary. And to my better half, a lady who keeps me solidly on the ground and focused, to you, my love, I say happy anniversary in advance. Ladies and gentlemen, let me raise my glass and say, here's to you, Merry Christmas, and a happy, happy New Year. May your God go with you. Good night. Namaste.